I want you to start by just imagining a ticking clock.
Right.
It's just sitting there, right in the background of basically everything you do online.
Yeah, constantly ticking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Every time you log into your bank, every single time you send, a secure message on an encrypted app, or even every time a massive global blockchain network validates a transaction.
All of it.
Yeah, all of it. This clock is ticking down to something that the cybersecurity world ominously calls Q-Day.
Which, I mean, it sounds like the plot of some sci-fi thriller.
Oh, totally. Like a summer blockbuster.
Yeah, but the anxiety around Q-Day is, it's completely grounded in reality. It's the theoretical moment when quantum computers become powerful enough to simply shatter the mathematical foundations of the encryption, protecting our entire digital infrastructure.
And the narrative we hear constantly, like in the news and from security vendors, is that this is an inevitable, impending technological apocalypse. Like the quantum boogeyman is coming, there is nowhere to hide, and all our secrets are going to be laid bare.
That's the standard pitch, yeah.
Right. But looking at the stack of academic papers, government security assessments from NIST, and some really cutting-edge research from preprints.org that we have in front of us today, a completely different picture actually starts to emerge.
A much more nuanced one.
Exactly. What if the universe, like the actual fundamental laws of physics, thermodynamics, and quantum mechanics, what if it has a hidden pause button built into this threat?
It's a fascinating question.
Yeah.
Because the deeper you look into the physical constraints of quantum mechanics, the more you realize that the apocalyptic narrative misses some massive, massive roadblocks.
Right.
We are definitely going to look at the genuine threats today because certain types of encryption are absolutely in the crosshairs. But we're also going to explore a groundbreaking concept that it really flips our understanding of real-world cybersecurity risk management completely on its head.
And specifically, we're talking about how physical constraints, something mathematically defined as oracle failure thresholds, create this almost impenetrable shield around symmetric encryption.
Yeah, which is huge.
It is. So whether you are a chief information security officer looking at a decade-long security budget, wondering where to allocate millions of dollars without just setting them on fire.
Right, which nobody wants to do.
Nobody wants to do that. Or maybe you're just a curious mind wondering if your crypto wallet is actually going to be drained by a supercomputer in 5 years. You're going to get the ultimate insider perspective on this deep dive today.
Yeah, we can all take a collective breath here. Because while the threat is real, the physical universe actually has our back in some very surprising ways.
So let's pull apart the threat landscape first, because we aren't dealing with just a single monolithic quantum attack, right?
Yeah, not at all.
There are two major algorithms that keep cryptographers awake at night. You've got Shor's algorithm and Grover's algorithm, and they target completely different pieces of our security infrastructure.
We should probably start with Shor's algorithm, because that is the one posing an absolute existential threat to what we call public key encryption.
Right, the asymmetric stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This encompasses RSA, elliptic curve cryptography. Basically, the systems that rely on the immense mathematical difficulty of factoring large integers or, solving discrete logarithms.
To really grasp why Shor's algorithm is so devastating, I think we have to look at the fundamental difference between classical computing and quantum computing.
Definitely.
A classical computer, even like a massive Thipper computer, it uses bits. Zeros and ones. It processes information sequentially.
Right, one step at a time.
Yeah. If it needs to find the prime factors of a massive, say, 2048-bit number, it basically has to use clever classical shortcuts to check possibilities, but it is still ultimately a sequential, incredibly slow process.
It's analogous to having a key ring with 1 billion keys and you're standing at the vault door trying every single one.
Sounds exhausting.
It is. You might have some tricks to guess which key looks most likely, but you are still bound by the physical time it takes to actually insert and turn them. For a 2048-bit RSA key, the sun would literally burn out, and the universe would experience heat death before a classical computer found the correct prime factors.
Wow. Okay, but a quantum computer throws that entire sequential model out the window using qubits.
Completely out of the window.
Because of quantum mechanical properties like superposition and entanglement, a qubit isn't restricted to just being a 0 or a 1. It exists in this complex state of probabilities representing multiple possibilities simultaneously.
Right, which creates quantum parallelism.
But Shor's algorithm doesn't just, like, try all the keys at once. It's a super common misconception, isn't it?
Oh, it's incredibly widespread. People think it just guesses everything simultaneously. But Shor's algorithm actually uses quantum mechanics to find the period of a function related to the factored number.
The period, like the rhythm.
Exactly. Think of it as finding the underlying rhythm or frequency of the mathematical lock. It uses a quantum Fourier transform to essentially filter out the wrong answers.
Okay, how does that filter work in practice?
Well, it creates destructive interference for all the incorrect prime factors. It cancels them out, kind of like how noise-canceling headphones eliminate background sound while creating constructive interference for the correct answer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so the right answer gets amplified, and the quantum computer finds the prime factors exponentially faster than any classical machine ever could.
So, going back to my analogy, instead of standing at the door with a massive queuing, Shor's algorithm is like having a lockpick that instantly senses the internal acoustic resonance of the lock, right?
Yeah.
It vibrates at the exact perfect frequency, and the tumblers just fall open.
That is a brilliant way to put it. It completely bypasses the brute force approach.
And the terrifying part is adversaries are not waiting for this lockpick to actually be built before they start attacking us. The source material outlines a strategy currently being deployed called Harvest Now, Decrypt Later, or HNDL.
Yeah, HNDL is the reason CISOs are losing sleep today.
I bet.
State-sponsored actors, highly sophisticated adversaries, they are currently scraping massive volumes of encrypted internet traffic.
Just vacuuming it all up.
Literally vacuuming it up. We're talking about intercepting data, flowing across fiber optic cables, and storing it in these massive, massive data centers.
Even though they can't read it.
Right, they cannot read a single byte of it today. But storage is incredibly cheap. So they're hoarding this encrypted data, simply waiting for the day a cryptographically relevant quantum computer, what we call a CRQC, comes online.
Once they possess that machine, they just run Shor's algorithm against the public keys that were captured, and decades of past secrets are suddenly unlocked.
It's all exposed.
We're talking about military intelligence, corporate intellectual property, biometric data, diplomatic cables. Anything that was sent over the wire today using RSA or elliptic curve becomes an open book tomorrow.
And looking at the IBM quantum roadmap, included in our sources, this is not like some theoretical problem for the 22nd century.
It's happening soon.
Very soon. IBM is predicting fault-tolerant quantum systems. Heavily error-corrected machines like their quantum Starling project could be operational by 2029.
2029, that's just around the corner.
Exactly. That places Q-Day within the current operational lifespan of the data we're securing right now.
Okay, so the panic surrounding public key cryptography is entirely justified. However, and this is the massive pivot we're making today, public keys are merely the mechanism we use to securely shake hands and share the actual keys.
Right, the symmetric keys.
Exactly. The real heavy lifting of encryption, the actual locking up of the files, the databases, the hard drives, that's handled by symmetric encryption, like the Advanced Encryption Standard, or AES.
If public key cryptography is the front door where you check ID, symmetric encryption is the titanium vault itself deep inside the building.
I love that. And so the critical question becomes, does the quantum lockpick that shatters the front door work on the vault itself?
And that introduces the second boogeyman of the quantum world, Grover's algorithm.
Right. And Grover's algorithm is where the nuance of quantum cryptanalysis really starts to matter, and where the global security panic might have severely overshot the reality.
Oh, absolutely overshot it.
Because Grover's algorithm is not like Shor's. It doesn't use a Fourier transform to instantly solve a mathematical trick. It's designed specifically for unstructured search problems.
Unstructured search is essentially a highly optimized quantum way to guess.
Just guessing.
Basically, yeah. If you're staring at a vault locked with an AES key, or you're trying to reverse a cryptographic hash function like SHA-256, there's no mathematical rhythm to find. You just have to find the one correct string of bits among an unimaginably vast ocean of incorrect strings.
And Grover's algorithm is the ultimate tool for that specific job.
It is. Theoretically, it provides what mathematicians refer to as a quadratic speedup.
Okay, what does that mean in plain English?
In classical terms, if you have a search space of size n, it takes, on average, n divided by 2 tries to find the target. If you have 100 boxes, you'll probably have to open about 50 of them to find the prize.
Makes sense.
But Grover's algorithm can find the target in roughly the square root of n steps.
Okay, so when you apply that square root to cryptographic key sizes, the initial math looks apocalyptic.
It really does. Let's take a standard symmetric key like AES 256. A 256-bit key has 2 to the power of 256 possible combinations.
Which is a number so large it exceeds the number of atoms in the observable universe.
Right. But if you take the square root of 2 to the 256, you get 2 to the 128.
Meaning Grover's algorithm essentially slices the security of an encryption key exactly in half.
Exactly. AES 256 is suddenly reduced to the security level of AES 128.
And AES 128, which is heavily used across global infrastructure today, is reduced to a measly 64 bits of security, which, for context, 64 bits can be cracked by a cluster of classical graphics cards in a matter of hours or days.
And that mathematical reality created what I like to call the illusion of the halved key.
The illusion?
Yeah, because on paper, reading the raw theory, it looks like symmetric encryption is teetering on the edge of collapse. But to understand why the universe pushes back against this, we have to look mechanically at how Grover actually achieves this quadratic speedup.
Okay, let's unpack this, because it uses a fascinating process called amplitude amplification.
Yes. The papers dive incredibly deep into the geometry of amplitude amplification, and it is crucial to understand. Imagine the entire search space, every possible wrong AES key, and the single correct AES key as a massive two-dimensional mathematical plane.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
One dimension represents the aggregate of all the wrong answers, and the other dimension represents the single right answer.
Got it.
The algorithm kicks off by placing the quantum computer into a uniform superposition. This means the system holds an equal probability of guessing every single possible key simultaneously.
So the state vector is sitting right in the middle of that plane.
Exactly. Then, it invokes something called an oracle function.
The oracle. This sounds mystical.
It does, but it's just a quantum black box that evaluates a guess. If it looks at a wrong key, it does absolutely nothing.
Okay.
But if it encounters the right key, the oracle flips the quantum phase of that specific target. It makes the amplitude of the correct answer negative.
See, the analogy of finding a grain of sand on a beach doesn't really do justice to the physics here. It's much closer to our noise-canceling headphones analogy from before. The oracle doesn't just flag the correct answer. It intentionally inverts the wave of the correct answer.
Spot on. And that inversion is the setup for the next step, which is called the diffusion operator.
What does that do?
This operator takes the entire quantum state and reflects it around the average of all probabilities.
Oh, I see.
Because the correct answer had its phase flipped to negative by the oracle, this diffusion process mathematically shrinks the probability of all the positive wrong answers and actively amplifies the probability of the negative right answer.
So it physically rotates the entire quantum state vector slightly closer to the correct solution on that 2D plane.
Yes.
You run the oracle, it flips the phase. You run the diffusion operator, it amplifies the target. You repeat this cycle sequentially over and over again, and with each iteration, the probability of measuring the correct key grows until it approaches nearly 100%.
But the source material from the Arkeos paper points out something mind-bending about the sheer number of sequential iterations required to actually pull that off.
Right. Let's look at the application of Grover's algorithm to hash functions, specifically SHA-256, which secures everything from internet certificates to the Bitcoin blockchain.
A major target.
To apply Grover to SHA-256, the paper notes that the gate depth, which is the number of sequential quantum operations that must be executed one after another, is on the order of 02 to the 128. I have to pause here and just push back on the implications of that number.
Go for it.
Wait, if Grover's algorithm is so powerful, why would it take longer than the age of the universe to break SHA-256? I thought quantum computers were supposed to be practically instantaneous, because the paper calculates that even if we grant a massive concession to the attacker, assuming they could build a quantum computer capable of performing 1 trillion operations per second.
Which is an astronomically faster clock speed than anything remotely feasible in quantum hardware today.
Right. Even with that magic machine, it would still take 10 to the 19th power years to complete that search.
That is a staggering 10 quintillion years.
That's vastly longer than the current age of the universe. How is this an imminent threat?
It's a great question. The discrepancy comes down to how quantum algorithms scale functionally versus how classical computers scale. The 10 to the 19th years figure arises from running a single sequential uninterrupted instance of Grover's algorithm.
Uninterrupted being the key word.
Right. And this forces us to address the critical difference between the Q1 model and the Q2 model of quantum attacks, which is outlined in the UK National Cybersecurity Center report.
This distinction is so vital because it defines the actual battlefield, right? Like, how does the attacker actually interact with the target system? Exactly. In the theoretical Q2 model, the attacker is allowed to query the target system, the server, the smart contract, the authentication module, in a state of quantum superposition.
Wait, what does that mean practically?
It means they can literally plug a quantum fiber optic cable into the target and feed a superposition of all possible guesses into the live oracle.
But the UK NCSC report makes it abundantly clear that the Q2 model is a purely academic fantasy. No secure system in the real world is going to expose its internal validation logic to a quantum superposition query.
No, of course not. The attacker cannot just hook up their quantum rig to your bank's login server.
Which means we operate exclusively in the Q1 model. Yes. In the Q1 model, the attacker intercepts classical data, say, a captured encrypted hard drive or an intercepted ciphertext, and they're forced to run the quantum attack completely offline, on their own hardware.
So they have to build their own simulated oracle.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And because they're running it offline, they are completely bound by the physical, temporal, and spatial limits of their own machine.
Which leads directly to the first major physical roadblock protecting symmetric encryption. Quantum computers do not parallelize the way classical computers do.
This is a massive paradigm shift.
In classical computing, parallelization is a simple linear equation. If you want to guess a password twice as fast, you just throw twice as much hardware at the problem. You buy two computers, split the dictionary in half, and you get a linear speedup.
Classical brute force scales perfectly, but the NCSC report explicitly states that Grover's algorithm is highly resistant to parallelization.
Okay, so if an adversary realizes that running a single instance of Grover takes 10 to the 19th years, their immediate thought is, I'll just build a billion quantum computers and run them all at once.
Sure, that's the classical mindset. But to reduce the quantum runtime by a factor of S, you don't need S quantum computers. You need S-squared parallel quantum processors.
S squared. Let's really pull apart the mechanics of that S squared penalty because it is punishing. Why does the math punish parallelization so severely?
It goes back to the amplitude amplification process we discussed earlier. Grover's algorithm relies on sequential iterations to rotate that probability vector toward the right answer.
Right.
The success probability grows quadratically with the number of sequential iterations. So if you try to chop the workload up and run it on multiple machines simultaneously, you are forcing each individual machine to run fewer sequential iterations.
You're robbing the algorithm of its compounding effect.
Precisely. Because the success probability is tied to the square of the iterations, cutting the iterations by a factor of S reduces your success probability on each machine by a factor of S squared. Yeah. So to compensate for that massive drop in probability and still guarantee that one of your machines actually finds the key, you have to spin up S-squared parallel instances.
Let's use an analogy to make this visceral. Classical parallelization is like hiring 10 painters to paint a house. 10 painters get the job done 10 times faster than one painter.
Easy.
But quantum parallelization with Grover's algorithm is entirely different. So it's not like hiring 10 painters to paint a house 10 times faster. It's like hiring 10 painters, but they keep bumping into each other, knocking over paint cans, and ruining the constructive interference.
That's a great way to visualize it.
So you actually need 100 painters just to get it done 10 times faster. The diminishing returns are absolutely brutal.
Brutal is the right word. If an adversary wants to speed up a Grover attack by a factor of 1,000,000, they need 1,000,000,000,000 parallel quantum processors.
1,000,000,000,000.
Yeah. And this parallelization requirement isn't optional because attackers are fighting against another fundamental constraint of quantum mechanics, circuit depth.
Right, circuit depth. This is essentially the ticking clock of a single quantum computation. It's the maximum number of sequential gates or operations you can apply to a qubit before you have to measure the result.
NIST suggests that when assessing quantum attacks, cryptographers should assume maximum feasible circuit depths of 2 to the 40, 2 to the 48, or at the absolute extreme science fiction boundary, 2 to the 56 gates.
The obvious question is, why limit the depth? Why can't we just build a stable quantum computer, load up Grover's algorithm for a 2 to the 128 depth search, and let it run quietly in the corner of a data center for a few centuries.
Because you cannot hit save on a quantum computation.
You can't hit save.
No.
Yeah.
That is a critical vulnerability of quantum states. The no-cloning theorem in quantum mechanics dictates that you cannot perfectly copy an unknown quantum state.
Great. So if you're halfway through a classical brute force attack and your data center loses power, your system reboots, loads the last checkpoint from the hard drive, and picks up exactly where it left off.
Exactly. But a quantum computer affords no such luxury. Quantum states, especially massive superpositions, are incredibly fragile.
How fragile are we talking?
If the machine pauses, if it needs routine maintenance, or if a single cosmic ray penetrates the shielding and strikes the dilution refrigerator, causing the temperature to fluctuate by a fraction of a millikelvin.
The quantum state interacts with the environment.
Yes, decoherence occurs. The wave function collapses.
The superposition shatters, and you lose everything. You don't just lose an hour of work, you lose the entire computation. You have to start back at iteration 0.
You are racing against the coherence time of the universe.
Yeah.
You have to complete the entire Grover search within the continuous, uninterrupted, coherent lifetime of the quantum hardware.
Wow.
That's why NIST caps the depth at what a highly advanced machine might theoretically run in a year or two without a single fatal failure. When you cap the circuit depth so severely, the attacker is forced to parallelize to finish the search.
And remember, the moment they parallelize, they get hit with that S-squared hardware penalty we just talked about.
Exactly, it's a trap.
Let's translate that S-squared penalty into physical hardware requirements. The sources clearly differentiate between logical qubits and physical qubits.
This is a crucial distinction.
When a paper says attacking AES-128 requires several thousand logical qubits, it sounds deceptive. It sounds like something you could fit in a large room. But a logical qubit is an abstract, mathematically idealized concept, right?
Yes. A logical qubit assumes perfect, error-free operation. In reality, physical qubits, whether they are superconducting loops, trapped ions, or topological structures, are intensely noisy and prone to constant errors.
They flip randomly.
They flip, they lose phase, they leak energy.
So to build one perfect logical qubit, you have to implement massive error correction.
And quantum error correction is phenomenally complex. Because you cannot copy the qubit to check it, you have to use schemes like surface codes.
How does a surface code work?
Well, a surface code involves taking a single data qubit and surrounding it with a 2D grid of measure qubits. You perform complex parity checks on the measure qubits to infer if an error happened to the data qubit, without ever actually looking at the data qubit itself.
Because looking at it would collapse it.
Exactly.
The overhead for this is staggering. The NCSC report estimates that to achieve a single reliable logical qubit capable of surviving the depth of an AES attack, you might need an overhead ratio of thousands to 1.
Thousands of physical qubits dedicated entirely to babysitting one single logical data qubit.
So let's stack all these physical roadblocks together. An adversary wants to break AES-128. They realize it takes too long sequentially, and they are capped by the circuit depth limit before the machine decoheres.
Right.
So they are forced to parallelize. The parallelization triggers the S-squared penalty, meaning they need millions of parallel processors.
Yes.
And every single logical qubit inside those millions of processors requires thousands of physical qubits just to run the error correction surface code.
Suddenly, we are not talking about a quantum computer the size of a server rack. We are talking about an adversary needing billions, potentially trillions, of perfectly calibrated, cryogenically frozen physical qubits working in perfect, synchronized tandem just to sustain a single Grover attack.
It rapidly transcends a software problem and becomes an engineering nightmare of unimaginably vast proportions.
It really does. But here's where it gets really interesting. Let us suspend disbelief for a moment.
Okay.
Let's assume an adversary, a nation-state with unlimited GDP, infinite resources, and centuries of engineering time, actually builds this continent-sized, S-squared scaled quantum facility.
Okay, they build the Death Star of quantum computers.
Right. They solve the decoherence problem, they solve the parallelization penalty, they still run into an even harder wall.
Harder wall.
A wall built into the fundamental mathematics of amplitude amplification itself.
Okay, this is the core focus of what we are unpacking today, the climax of this entire physical resistance narrative. We are diving into Oracle failure thresholds and how they dictate real-world risk management.
Yes.
This is based heavily on that incredible research published on preprints.org. We talked earlier about the Oracle, that quantum black box that evaluates a guess and marks the correct answer with a phase flip.
In every theoretical textbook and academic paper modeling Grover's algorithm, the Oracle is treated as a perfect, abstract mathematical function. It never makes a mistake. It is an omniscient black box.
Right, but when you build an actual physical quantum computer, the oracle isn't a magical entity. It's a highly complex physical circuit comprised of thousands or millions of quantum logic gates.
To run an offline attack against AES, the physical oracle circuit has to load the adversary's key guess, run the entire highly complex AES encryption algorithm in reverse, using quantum gates, verify if the resulting plaintext matches the target, conditionally apply that delicate phase flip to the superposition, and then flawlessly uncompute the entire AES process to return the key bits to their original state without leaving any residual entanglement.
I mean, that is a massive, incredibly deep subcircuit of its own.
It is. And what the researchers at preprints.org ask is a deceptively simple question. What happens if this physical oracle isn't perfect?
What happens if it glitches?
Exactly. What happens if, just once in a while, due to a microscopic gate error, a tiny calibration drift, or a microsecond of localized decoherence, the oracle simply fails to apply that phase flip to the correct answer?
The downstream effects of a single missed flip are catastrophic for the entire attack.
Completely catastrophic.
If the oracle fails and skips the phase flip, the diffusion operator has no idea that an error occurred. It blindly applies its geometric inversion based on the current state.
Right.
But because the correct target wasn't marked with a negative amplitude, the diffusion process rotates the entire quantum state vector the wrong way.
Instead of amplifying the correct answer, the algorithm actively suppresses it and amplifies the ocean of wrong answers. It undoes the work of previous iterations.
It's like you're carefully turning the dial of a safe, clicking it closer and closer to the combination. But occasionally your hand spasms and you spin the dial wildly in the opposite direction.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And the research quantifies this destructive interference by defining something called the practical reliability threshold,
Yeah.
mathematically denoted as P star.
PV star. Okay.
P star is defined as the maximum allowable failure rate of the oracle before the overall success probability of Grover's algorithm drops below 50%.
Why 50%?
Because once the success rate dips below 50%, the algorithm is effectively useless. You would be better off just making random classical guesses than spending the energy running the quantum circuit, because the quantum machine is actively fighting against you.
Wow. And the mathematics governing this threshold are honestly the most vital takeaway of this entire discussion. The research demonstrates that this reliability threshold scales exponentially downward with the size of the search space.
The formula derived in the paper as P star of n is proportional to 2 to the negative n over 2.
Translating that exponential scaling into operational reality reveals a massive security buffer. As the size of the encryption key increases, the demand for the oracle's absolute physical flawlessness doesn't just increase linearly, it skyrockets exponentially.
We can look at the empirical data from the simulations run in the paper to make this concrete. They started by simulating a tiny, practically useless toy encryption key, just 40 bits.
40 bits, okay.
To maintain a mere 50% success rate on a 40-bit key, the simulation proved the physical oracle must fail less than one time in 833,000 iterations.
That is already demanding a hardware reliability of 99.9999%.
Right.
Achieving 5 nines of reliability on a massive quantum circuit is incredibly difficult. But nobody in the modern world uses 40-bit keys. Global infrastructure relies on 128-bit keys and 256-bit keys.
So we take that exponential scaling law and we plug in n equals 122. What does the universe demand of the attacker then?
The results are truly staggering. For an attacker to successfully execute Grover's algorithm against a standard AES 128 key, the physical oracle must execute flawlessly for 10 to the 20th power consecutive calls.
That is a 20 followed by 20 zeros.
100 quintillion flawless, deeply complex quantum operations without a single missed phase flip.
Yes.
Let me play the skeptical CISO for a moment, all right?
Do it.
I sit in meetings all day hearing about exponential technological growth. We went from vacuum tubes that burned out every hour to microchips packing billions of transistors in just a few decades. Technology moves blindingly fast. Why can't we assume that quantum hardware engineers will just eventually figure it out? Won't they eventually build a machine capable of 1 in 10 to the 20th reliability?
It is entirely natural to project classical computing's trajectory onto quantum computing, but the paper argues persuasively that this is not merely a temporary engineering hurdle. It is a fundamental thermodynamic and physical scaling wall.
Okay, how so?
We have to return to our discussion on error correction. To make a quantum circuit more reliable, you cannot just use better materials. You have to add layers of active error correction.
You have to add more measure qubits, more parity checks, more surface code layers.
Exactly the problem.
Yeah.
Implementing heavier error correction inherently requires adding vastly more physical qubits and millions of additional physical logic gates. But every single microscopic gate you add to the system introduces a new, non-zero probability of localized failure.
Ah, I see the trap. It creates a brutal feedback loop. You realize the oracle is failing, so you build a significantly larger, more complex error correction grid to fix it.
Right.
But the massive size of the new grid creates millions of new opportunities for spontaneous errors to occur.
The complexity of the cure becomes deadlier than the disease. The exponential scaling of the practical reliability threshold dictates that as you approach cryptographically relevant key sizes like 128 or 256 bits, you are demanding a level of continuous physical perfection that likely violates the fundamental noise limits and thermodynamic realities of the universe.
Let's map this directly to real-world cybersecurity risk management, because this entirely changes the conversation in boardrooms globally.
Completely changes it.
The conventional panic-driven wisdom peddled by many security vendors is Grover's algorithm has AES 256 to AES 128. Therefore, AES 128 is functionally broken, and you must authorize a multi-million-dollar infrastructure overhaul to double your symmetric keys to 256 bits immediately before Q day.
And that conventional wisdom is fundamentally flawed because it operates entirely in a vacuum of pure, abstract mathematics, ignoring physical reality.
Right.
The research on oracle failure thresholds proves that Grover's algorithm is so mathematically fragile, so vulnerable to the slightest disruption in amplitude amplification, that maintaining the required coherence for 10 to the 20th operations is likely beyond any foreseeable hardware.
Which means CISOs and IT directors can manage their risk profiles differently. They do not need to panic about migrating their legacy symmetric keys with the same desperate, immediate urgency as their public keys.
Exactly. AES 128 is not on the verge of imminent collapse.
You don't just have to beat the math of AES. You have to beat the physical limits of the universe. The universe itself provides a natural, physical firewall around symmetric encryption.
The concept of a physical firewall brings us perfectly to another immense constraint. Because even if we pretend, against all laws of physics, that an attacker somehow constructs a magical, perfectly error-free oracle capable of 10 to the 20th operations, they still have to plug that machine into the wall.
They still have to pay the raw energy bill to run the computation.
Exactly.
This dives into the NIST thermodynamic analysis of quantum search algorithms. This analysis steps away from qubits and gates and looks at the raw cost of computation in terms of fundamental joules of energy. And it centers around a concept that I find completely mind-blowing, the Landauer limit.
Rolf Landauer was a brilliant physicist working at IBM in the 1960s. He discovered a deep, inescapable link between information theory and physical thermodynamics. He proved that there is a minimum, irreducible amount of physical energy required to erase a single bit of information.
This touches on the concept of entropy, right? The second law of thermodynamics states that the total entropy, or disorder, of a closed system must always increase.
Landauer realized that information is physical. When a computer erases a bit of data, say, clearing a register from a 1 to a 0, it decreases the logical entropy of the system.
Okay.
But because total entropy must increase, that erased logical information has to be converted into physical entropy. It must be dumped into the surrounding environment as physical heat.
So every single time a computer clears its memory, every time a logic gate overwrites a value, it generates a tiny, mathematically defined minimum amount of heat.
Yes. In massive classical data centers today, heat dissipation is already a primary limiting factor. But the NIST paper applies this thermodynamic boundary to Grover's algorithm, comparing it to classical search using an incredibly strict framework called the Brownian model of computation.
What's the Brownian model?
The Brownian model is a theoretical concept that attempts to bypass the Landauer limit entirely using reversible computing.
Reversible computing.
Yeah. In a reversible computer, you use specialized logic structures, like Toffoli gates, where you never actually erase any information. You compute the entire algorithm forward, generating the result, and then you flawlessly uncompute the entire algorithm backward to return the system to its initial state.
So because no bits are ever permanently erased, you do not trigger Landauer's heat penalty.
Exactly. It is the ultimate idealized theoretical model for perfectly energy-efficient computation.
So NIST creates a scenario that gives the quantum computer every single conceivable advantage. They assume the quantum computer can operate flawlessly using this idealized Brownian reversible model.
Right.
They set all the technology-dependent cost factors for quantum hardware to 1. This means they are making the massive leap of faith that quantum physical qubits will eventually be as cheap, easy to manufacture, and energetically efficient as classical silicon transistors are today.
They assume a perfect quantum world, and then they pit this magical quantum machine against classical computers operating under pessimistic constraints. They look at what an attacker can achieve with a fixed, massive energy budget.
What does the math reveal when you pit theoretical perfection against classical reality?
The revelation is that even under these wildly optimistic assumptions, granting the quantum computer every physical miracle, Grover's algorithm still fails to provide the world-ending advantage people expect.
Oh.
The thermodynamic cost of maintaining the quantum state and executing the massive circuit depth simply overwhelms the quadratic speedup.
Looking at the specific numbers from the NIST conclusion, the paper states that Grover's algorithm only extends the reach of a classical search by a maximum factor of 2 to the 46.
To contextualize a factor of 2 to the 46, imagine an incredibly well-funded state adversary. They dedicate the entire electrical output of a massive nuclear power plant for a full year solely to powering their classical brute force cracking farm.
Okay, that's a lot of power.
They search a certain number of keys. Now they switch off the classical farm and they plug in our magical thermodynamically perfect quantum computer using that exact same massive energy budget.
And
The quantum computer can only search a space 2 to the 46 times larger than the classical farm.
But 2 to the 46 is a microscopic drop in the bucket when we are dealing with the massive scales of cryptographic key sizes. If an organization decides to upgrade from an AES 128-bit key to an AES 192-bit key, they have increased the total search space by a factor of 2 to the 64.
That math is the nail in the coffin. Moving from 128 to 192 bits completely swallows the absolute maximum theoretical thermodynamic advantage of Grover's algorithm. It absorbs the 2 to the 46 advantage and still leaves a massive 18 bits of security buffer left over.
The conclusion drawn by NIST is profound for network architects. The frantic rush to double symmetric key sizes to AES 256 might be a complete overreaction.
Completely.
AES 192 is not just mathematically secure, it is thermodynamically invincible. It possesses more entropy than a perfect quantum computer could churn through without boiling the oceans.
The realization here is that we often view cryptography purely as an abstract mathematical battleground. But the physical laws of thermodynamics act as an ultimate unbreakable firewall. Energy in the universe is finite. Heat must eventually be dissipated.
Right.
These immutable physical realities place hard, impenetrable bounds on what any adversary, no matter how technologically advanced, can actually achieve.
Let me make sure I'm fully absorbing this. Even if an absolute supervillain solves the error correction problem, scales past the parallelization penalty, builds a 10 to the 20th reliable oracle, and constructs a massive quantum facility,
Yeah.
the literal electricity required to run Grover's algorithm long enough to break AES 192 would essentially bankrupt their nation, or perhaps require building a Dyson sphere around the sun just to power the cooling systems to dissipate the heat.
The universe simply does not possess enough accessible energy to allow Grover's algorithm to threaten AES 192. Physics wins.
We have established a tremendous amount of good news regarding the vault. Symmetric encryption is heavily guarded by the parallelization penalty, the extreme fragility of the oracle threshold, and the fundamental thermodynamic limits of computation.
Yes, very good news.
AES 128 is likely safe for decades, and AES 192 is practically invincible. But this deep dive isn't just about celebrating what is safe. We need to pivot to what is genuinely broken and what immediate action is required.
We must bring the focus back to the immediate reality for anyone managing data. Because while the symmetric vault is thermodynamically secure, the asymmetric front door public key cryptography is hanging off its hinges.
Shor's algorithm, which targets public keys, does not suffer from the same oracle failure thresholds or massive parallelization penalties.
It doesn't.
The math of the quantum Fourier transform is remarkably efficient. Shor's algorithm is the real existential threat, and the danger goes far beyond just sending secure encrypted messages. Public key cryptography is the absolute foundation of digital signatures.
Digital signatures are the glue holding the internet's trust model together.
It's exactly.
Every time your phone downloads an over-the-air software update, a digital signature authenticates that the code actually came from Apple or Google, and not a malicious hacker. Every digital certificate that proves a website is legitimate relies on it.
And every transaction validated on a decentralized global blockchain network uses public key cryptography to prove ownership of the assets.
If an adversary uses Shor's algorithm to forge a digital signature, the consequences are immediate and catastrophic. They could push deeply embedded malicious firmware updates to millions of devices globally.
Terrifying.
They could seamlessly spoof banking portals to intercept credentials. Or, in the case of Web3 and crypto, they could completely rewrite the ledger of a blockchain network, transferring millions of dollars of assets because they can mathematically spoof the owner's signature.
The solution the industry is rallying behind is migrating to post-quantum cryptography, or PQC.
PQC is an interesting field because it is not about using quantum computers to defend ourselves.
Right, it's classical math.
Exactly. It's about cryptographers designing entirely new, incredibly complex classical mathematical algorithms that they believe quantum computers simply lack the specific mechanisms to solve efficiently.
The source material outlines two primary families of PQC algorithms currently being standardized: lattice-based schemes like dilithium and Falcon, and hash-based schemes like C and CS plus Fowler.
And this is where the migration process gets incredibly painful for engineers. We are facing what the literature calls the PQC trilemma.
The PQC trilemma.
Global networks, particularly decentralized systems like blockchains or massive IoT networks, have to balance three fiercely competing forces: security, decentralization, and performance.
It's a classic engineering trade-off where you can usually optimize for two, but the third severely suffers.
Let's examine SVCS Plus to see the trilemma in action. SVCS Plus is a hash-based signature scheme. The source material highlights that it offers top-level, highly conservative quantum resistance.
Because its security relies purely on the proven strength of cryptographic hash functions.
Exactly, making it incredibly secure against both classical and quantum attacks. You optimize heavily for security, but the catch is immense.
The catch comes in the form of performance and scale, right?
Huge catch.
A standard RSA 2048 digital signature, the kind used billions of times a day, is compact, about 256 bytes in size. A ISFN CS Plus signature, offering equivalent security, inflates to a massive 8,100 bytes.
It is over 30 times larger. Furthermore, it requires significantly more computational overhead simply to verify that the signature is valid.
Consider the implications of applying that 30x bloat to a blockchain network attempting to process thousands of transactions per second.
As a night
If
bell.
every single transaction signature suddenly inflates from 256 bytes to over 8 kilobytes,
Yeah.
the physical size of the blockchain bloats massively. The hard drive storage requirements for maintaining the ledger skyrocket exponentially.
And if we trace that bloat to its logical conclusion, it directly attacks the decentralization pillar of the trilemma. If the blockchain ledger becomes hundreds of terabytes in size and verifying transactions takes immense CPU power, regular users on standard hardware can no longer afford to run independent validator nodes. They get priced out.
The network inevitably consolidates. Only massive corporate data centers with vast storage arrays and server farms can afford to participate.
The network centralizes into the hands of a few wealthy operators, completely destroying the trustless, distributed premise that the blockchain was built upon in the first place.
So engineers are forced to choose. Do you implement SFIN NCS Plus to guarantee absolute quantum security, knowing it will cripple performance and centralize your network?
Okay.
Or do you attempt to optimize performance by choosing a lattice-based scheme like dilithium?
Right. Dilithium produces much smaller signatures and verifies faster, but its security relies on vastly newer, more complex mathematical assumptions about lattice grids that might contain undiscovered vulnerabilities that cryptographers simply haven't found yet.
That tension raises an incredibly important strategic question for any organization. The solution outlined across all the research papers is the imperative for cryptographic agility.
Agility is everything. Organizations, governments, and blockchain networks simply cannot afford to hard-code one specific PQC algorithm deep into the bedrock of their infrastructure.
They need to comprehensively inventory all their cryptographic dependencies today. They need to architect their software so that encryption algorithms act like modular puzzle pieces.
Yes. If a vulnerability is suddenly discovered in dilithium 5 years from now, they need to be able to dynamically hot swap it for a different algorithm without having to tear down the entire network infrastructure.
The takeaway for prioritizing resources is incredibly clear. Whether you are a CISO securing a Fortune 500 corporate network, a developer building a decentralized application, or an IT manager planning a hardware refresh, The quantum Pearl Harbor is not going to be a sudden, catastrophic cracking of your encrypted databases and hard drives.
No, it won't be. The panic surrounding Grover's algorithm and symmetric keys is largely a distraction from the real threat.
The immediate, vital priority must be public key replacement. Resources, budget allocations, and engineering hours need to be laser-focused on migrating vulnerable digital signatures and key exchange mechanisms to PQC algorithms immediately to mitigate the harvest now, decrypt later threat.
And for the massive bulk of stored data, organizations can safely rely on the physical resilience and thermodynamic immutability of their existing symmetric AES keys.
It requires a paradigm shift in how we assess risk. It's about playing the odds grounded in immutable physical reality, rather than reacting to theoretical mathematical hype.
Absolutely.
Let's briefly recap the immense technical journey we've navigated in this discussion. We started by looking at the terrifying theoretical mathematics of Grover's algorithm, confronting the illusion that AES 256 could be trivially sliced down to the security level of AES 128.
But then we mapped that math onto physical reality. We saw the punishing S-squared parallelization penalty that forces an attacker to deploy trillions of processors just to gain a measurable speed up against the ticking clock of circuit depth decoherence.
We dove into the microscopic world of error correction and surface codes, realizing the staggering overhead required to build even a single logical qubit.
Right.
And that led us to the most vital realization. The extreme fragility of the Oracle threshold. The physical requirement that an attacker's quantum hardware must execute 10 to the 20th flawlessly consecutive operations without a single microscopic phase flip error, just to maintain a 50% chance of breaking a single AES 128 key.
We concluded the defensive analysis by looking at the absolute limits of computation through thermodynamics, proving that even a thermodynamically flawless, idealized quantum machine operating on the Brownian model is bound by the energy constraints of the Landauer limit, fundamentally cementing AES 192 as an impenetrable, physically unyielding fortress.
We've laid out the clear roadmap for action. Prioritize PQC migration for the vulnerable asymmetric front doors, accept the trade-offs of the PQC trilemma, and build systems with deep cryptographic agility. But before we wrap this up, there is one final, deeply provocative thought hiding in the implications of all this source material.
There is.
Something that should prevent any security professional from becoming too comfortable behind their thermodynamic firewall.
Throughout our entire analysis of the symmetric threat, we have established that Grover's algorithm is severely, perhaps terminally, constrained by the physical reliability of the oracle and the delicate geometric mechanics of amplitude amplification.
Right.
But what if the next massive breakthrough in quantum cryptanalysis doesn't happen in an engineering lab? What if the breakthrough isn't about figuring out how to make a physical oracle less noisy, or how to build a denser, more efficient surface code grid?
What if the breakthrough is entirely mathematical? What if, somewhere in the world, a brilliant cryptographer or a state-sponsored mathematician discovers a completely new, entirely unforeseen class of quantum algorithms for unstructured search? An algorithm that approaches the problem from a completely different vector, completely bypassing the need for an oracle or the fragile geometry of amplitude amplification altogether.
If the underlying theoretical mathematics of the attack fundamentally change, the physical safety net we rely on today, the oracle failure thresholds, the destructive interference of a missed phase flip, the specific parallelization penalties could vanish overnight.
Wow.
We have proven that we are safe from Grover. But it would be a catastrophic failure of imagination to assume that Grover is the final ultimate word in quantum search mechanics.
That is the ultimate unknown hovering over the cryptographic horizon. Thank you for joining us on this extensive journey today. We have taken you from the abstract, mind-bending mathematics of quantum phase flips all the way down to the literal physical heat generated by erasing a single bit of information.
It's been quite a ride.
We want you to look at your own networks, your own operational data, and ask yourself a critical question. When that ticking clock inevitably hits Q-Day, are your systems cryptographically agile enough to survive tomorrow? Keep questioning the established narrative, look beyond the math to the physics, and we will see you next time.